অনুষ্ঠানটা এটা সম্পর্ক প্রকাশনা সংস্থা এবং ইউকের ওয়েলস লিটারেচার এক্সচেঞ্জের যৌথ একটি সভা। পাবলিশার্স বুকসেলার্স গিল্ডের কাছে আমরা কৃতজ্ঞ, তারা আমাদেরকে এই সুযোগটা দিয়েছেন এখানে এই সভাটা করার জন্য। So now I will switch to English and welcome all of you. I would really like to welcome on stage, sitting on my left is Miss Alexandra Buckler, who runs Wales Literature Exchange and Literature Across Frontiers. And we have Angarath Price, eminent Welsh author on the right, on the far right, and just next to me is Francesca, who is also a Welsh writer. Thank you all for coming, and we will have a book launch here which is of new Welsh writing by women writers. We have 6 writers. So yes, thank you. So we will go into the formal launch at the end of the program. Just a few information for those of you who would like to buy the book and get it signed by the authors. You can come to the Sampark stall, which is E46, and right opposite is the British Council stall, and you can get it signed from the British Council stall. So I would first request Ms. Alexandra Buckler to say a few words about how this anthology came about and the relationship between Wales Literature Exchange and overall with India in general, because they are right here from Kerala. They attended a festival in Kerala and are here. So I would request Alexandra to first talk about overall Wales-India relationship.
Thank you. Welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for coming to our session. As Shunandan said, we are launching a book, but it's not the first one that has been published by his publishing house. This one is a collection of short stories by women writers, and it's something that we had been discussing with Sunandan, and we are now presenting this book to you, but also we will be talking to two authors whose short stories are in the anthology, and one of them has actually been published also in Bangla, in Bengali translation. We have some more books here which you can actually purchase at the stand. Our relationship with India and with this wonderful city and with the publisher goes back quite far. We have been working with Indian publishers and festivals and book fairs for over 15 years. And we bring authors from Wales, but also from the rest of Europe. So it's something that we really treasure, because there is always an interested audience. I know that people in India like to read, and seeing so many people here at the book fair confirms that. So I think we can maybe return to this subject of what we have been doing. We also have been emphasizing translation. So we have been working with poets, for example, who translate each other. In a workshop situation, we have worked with a well-known Bengali poet, Shubro Bandopadhyay, who I believe has a new book being launched at this book fair now, and many others. So at this point, I think I'll pass the microphone back to you, and you can maybe talk about the authors and their work and ask them questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We would principally conduct this in English. This is an English session, but we will have a small Q&A. So যদি কেউ বাংলায় প্রশ্ন জিজ্ঞেস করতে চান, that's also fine. So first I go to Angharad. Angharad, as you know, that I have translated one of your books many years ago, which is in Bengali. It is called Rebecca Jones's Kotha, in English, Life of Rebecca Jones. And you wrote it, of course, in Welsh, and then it got translated into English, and of course Bengali, but I'm sure in some other languages as well. And Angharad Prize got several awards for this book, which those of you who are, of course, সবাই আপনারা বাঙালি, so I feel it's almost like ওয়েলশের পথের পাঁচালীর মতন একটা বই, খুবই important, very important novel, and very important, and also a great exposition of Wales from late 19th century, early 20th century. So, but that novel we can come back later. The short story here in this collection, if you could tell us a little bit about your overall short stories and this short story, and why is it special, and so on.
Should I talk about the novel first?
Yeah, as you like.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here today in this fantastic book fair, and to be in Kolkata. It's amazing. And thank you for coming here this afternoon. Yes, maybe I should explain a little bit about Wales. It's part of the UK, you probably know. And in Wales we have two languages. So we've got the English language, but also we have the Welsh language, which is a Celtic language related to Irish, Scottish, and Breton, which is spoken in France today. So I write in the Welsh language, which is my mother language, although, of course, I speak English as well, as you can hear. Welsh literature is a very old literature, which goes back to the 6th century. So it's one of the oldest literatures in Europe. And it's still very much alive today. So there's lots of people writing novels and poetry and drama in the Welsh language. I was delighted when a few years ago Sunandan translated my novel into Bangla. It was such an honor for me that the novel had traveled as far as West Bengal and as far as India. On the surface, this is a very Welsh novel. It talks about my mother's family who live on a remote farm in the middle of the mountains in Wales. And it tells the story of my grandfather's 3 brothers who were born blind. So when they were born, they couldn't see anything. And as a result, they had to be sent away to a special school in England. So they had to leave their own culture, their own language, even their own religion, and be educated in the English system, which was very British, you know, very much part of the British Empire. So they had a very schizophrenic youth. On the one hand, the Welsh language, Welsh culture, very rural, and on the other hand, the values of the British Empire and the English language. And when I was talking to Sunandan about this novel, he said, well, maybe Indian readers can identify with that. You know, you've had the British Empire here, as you know, and this kind of dual, the tension between 2 cultures is maybe something Indian readers and Bangla readers can identify with as well. So I thought that was very interesting. Literature crosses borders and boundaries, and I'm very pleased that translation has made this possible. Now I'm turning to this anthology, which is being launched today. It's being published here today, and it's so thrilling for Francesca and me to be part of this. And thank you to Sunandan and to Alexandra for making this publication possible. These are 6 short stories written by 6 Welsh female authors, some of them writing in Welsh, in the Celtic language, and some of them writing in English. My story is about a walk I used to take with my father regularly near our home when I was a very small child. My father was a very impatient man. He didn't like to go for walks with small children. He was a historian. His mind was always on distant things, on higher things. And I was always very aware of this when I was a child. So I used to go for a walk with him, and I remember holding his big hand, and I couldn't even hold his hand because it was so big, so I had to hold just 2 of his fingers. And I used to follow him, and his mind was always somewhere else. So in the meantime, I would look at the fence that was along the path, you know, and those pillars of the fence were my companions. My father was far away. I needed friends on my own level. So the fence became very important, and the fence was made up of slate. So I come from an area where slate was quarried, and I always felt that these slate pillars, who were the same size as me, were my friends. So that's the story. It's about a very short walk along the slate fence and then back up along another path where there was a cemetery. And when we came upon the cemetery, the dynamics would change. So at the beginning, my father was the strong one, was the tall one. I was the small one. But when we passed the cemetery, I was tall for some reason. I understood the cemetery, whereas my father feared the cemetery. So the dynamics changed. And I remember those walks very clearly. They were very, very important to me because my father passed on at fairly early age, and thinking back to those walks means a lot to me today. So that's the story.
Thank you, Francesca. আপনারা যারা পিছনে বসে আছেন যদি একটু কষ্ট করে সামনে এসে বসেন তাহলে খুব ভালো লাগবে। দর্শকরা যারা পিছনে বসে আছেন যদি একটু সামনে চলে আসেন ভালো হয়. Well, I turn to sorry, I made a mistake. I said Angarad. Thank you, Angarad. But I'll turn to Francesca now. I'll just read out a little bit from one of Francesca's short stories that is included in this anthology. Cleo's relationship with the land of her mother's fathers was erratic. She claimed Welshness when it suited her, such as when naming her children or when interacting with demographics traditionally hostile to the English, like the Irish. Everybody wants to be loved by the Irish. At dinner parties, when none of her Celtic brethren were present, she would trot out the line that thanks to the social assent of her parents, she would never actually had to endure living in Wales. Now that her mother had returned here alone in what she theatrically referred to as the winter of her life, Marianne was theatrical generally, Cleo was less prone to getting misty-eyed about her origins. Now, this is a question not only to you but also to Angharad, and I was kind of mentioning this to Alexandra earlier in an email, that this paragraph is actually, I think, brings out a lot of this duality in not only in case of the Welsh nationality, but it also is very much, it has resonance in what it is to be a Bengali, not only now, for the last 150 years. This sort of pull between an ethnic identity and a more quote-unquote cosmopolitan identity. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, I just wanted to echo what Angharad said. Thank you so much to everyone at Sandpark for publishing this and for all of you guys for being here. It's just such a thrill. So this story is narrated by a woman who, as was probably evident from the paragraph, has Welsh heritage but has grown up outside Wales and has this kind of quite negative relationship with her Welsh identity in that she kind of uses it as a sort of source of cultural capital in contexts that she thinks will be useful to her. And as a Welsh person living outside Wales for the past 15 years, so almost as long as I lived in Wales the first 18 years of my life, I often meet these kind of, in Britain there's a lot of shame about British identity a lot of the time for obvious reasons. There's these kind of competing currents of, on the one hand, you have extremely arrogant nationalist people, in England especially, but then also these very self-deprecating people who don't want to claim that identity because of the baggage of that identity. So I've met a lot of people who are quite blatantly English, but who will kind of claim roots that are quite tenuous. So I was kind of playing it for laughs. I mean, the story is, it's a funny story, it's not a heavy story. But I think it's interesting that identity is so often used to gain some kind of capital in the UK, be that social capital, cultural capital. So I really wanted to sort of like take that kind of trope of social interaction and make it something funny in the story. But yeah, I agree that Welsh identity generally is often a fraught identity because there's so many kind of factors that affect it. Angharad and I have been talking so much over the last few days about the Welsh language, which obviously traditionally for centuries, you know, the English really tried, the British state really tried to erase Welsh culture, Welsh language, and institute British values and British culture and British language over that, often in very brutal ways. I mean, naturally brutal. How can you erase a cultural identity without brutality? So consequently, there are a lot of Welsh people who don't have that, they don't have Cymraeg Welsh as their mother tongue. And where I grew up, there was this, the area that I grew up in, North Wales, there's a lot of people who speak Welsh as their mother tongue and a lot of people who speak English as their mother tongue. And it's only in the last sort of 10 years that a lot of the tension between those two groups is kind of disappearing a lot because Welsh is gaining, thanks to the work of lots of Welsh language campaigners, and political activists and people who really dedicated themselves to this struggle, Welsh in the past 10 years is at last getting parity with English on a legislative level. And young people now who didn't necessarily come from Welsh-speaking households, but who are Welsh, are excited about learning the language and want to. So it's this identity that kind of, it's quite, I don't know about how you feel, but I think it's a really beautiful moment for the Welsh language and for Welsh culture and to be Welsh, because there's real excitement about Welsh identity generally, especially in opposition to English identity.
Yeah, Angarad?
Yes, and I think the wonderful thing about coming to places like this and having conversations like we've been having in India over the last few days is that you see these things in a context. You see the international context. You see similar processes happening elsewhere, for example, here in West Bengal. So you compare your own experiences to what other people have suffered, enjoyed, celebrated. You know, you can have a deeper understanding of what your own culture has been through, of the broader historical processes. Yesterday at the literature meet, I was listening to people talking about colonialism, you know, and there was a lot of talk about East against West. But of course, our perspective can also show you that colonialism happened in the West to the smaller cultures there, you know. So these dialogues are so important. They enrich our understanding of history, politics, the relationship between different languages. So yes, thank you for making these dialogues possible in venues such as this. And the literature itself is a nuanced way of dealing with these things. You know, you can look at personal lives, individual experiences, and compare and contrast, and I think that's so valuable.
So, thank you, Angarad. Francesca, one more question to you. One of Francesca's books, by the way, has been published by Hachette, and which is a good news that they had few copies here in the Kolkata Book Fair, and they're all sold out. But talking about that in terms of publishing, and I'm sure Alexandra may also have a word or two about that, because she knows publishing definitely much more than I do. But one question, that when you get published with a large imprint like Hachette, which is really a global publishing company, originally French, and now really worldwide. So how does it feel as a Welsh author that when you get published in Wales and when you get published with a global brand? What is that?
I mean, it feels incredible, you know. It was so surreal to see my books in India and really to see them all over the world. You know, I've seen them in English language bookshops in France, in Germany. It's mad, it's exciting. At the same time, I think it's really important that we, in the literary world, really always big up the importance of smaller publishers. You know, so my first two books, as you said, were published by Hachette. And it was a wonderful experience in many ways, but it was also, you know, especially as someone coming from Wales, coming from a smaller country, your books can get a little bit lost, I think. And I noticed my first book was set in the south of France and London and Greece, so places that people know more about. And I did notice the difference that because my second novel is set in rural Wales, it did in this kind of big corporate publisher just get less attention and less care and less kind of nuanced, even like editorial stuff. So I've actually, for my third book that's coming out in 2027, I've moved to Serpent's Tail, who are an independent British publisher. And I'm really excited to work with a smaller publisher and to see, I think, so much kind of care and dedication and love for work that's really pushing boundaries and doing something different is something that I'm just so looking forward to the experience of working with an indie, basically.
আমাদের দর্শকদের জন্য একটা জাস্ট পার্সপেক্টিভ দেওয়া যে ওয়েলশ ভাষাটা কতজন মানুষ কথা বলেন? মাত্র 3 লাখ লোক ওয়েলশ ভাষা কথা বলেন। 300,000, রাইট? সো 500,000, 5 লাখ লোক। তো 5 লাখ লোক ভাষাটায় কথা বলেন, কাজে ভাষাটা যথেষ্ট ছোট সেই অর্থে, কিন্তু তারপরেও ভাষাটা রিলেটিভলি অনেক ইন্টারেস্টিং সাহিত্য এবং সাহিত্যিকের জন্ম দেন। তো এটাও একটা বাঙালিদের জন্য একটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিস যে ইংরাজির বাইরে যে অনেক চর্চা হয়, আমি মাঝে মাঝে লিখেছি ওনাদের পত্রপত্রিকায়। সো আই উইল জাস্ট কাম ব্যাক টু দিস অ্যাগেন টু বোথ অফ ইউ, that when you are writing for a 500,000 population, I mean, in fact, there is one good advantage that Wales has, which I think we will not have in Bengal anymore for very long, which is that global brands don't open a Welsh chapter. So that's one advantage. You know, Australia doesn't have any indigenous Australian publishing because everyone else is there. All the global brands are in Australia, so, or Canada, for example. Because you have a smaller number, so the one advantage I feel is that it doesn't make, you know, economic sense for global brands to open shop there. So, I mean, at least Wales has homegrown Welsh publishing in that sense, which keeps, I mean, this is just a comment, not much of exactly a question to, one question to, if I may ask Alexander, that you have Literature Across Frontiers now for what, 15, 20 years, you are running it, and 25 years?
Yes.
Okay.
We're celebrating 25 years.
Yeah, so I should explain this to all our, audience here, that Alexandra Buchler has been running an organization called Literature Across Frontiers. Shimana Baire Sahityo, ba Shimana Periye Sahityo. And she has really pioneered this in all of Europe, so that the smaller languages of Europe, not only Welsh, but Welsh or Irish or various other such languages, Catalan, right? I mean, various languages. And she has bridged these languages through various kinds of programs. So how you have made kind of Wales your workplace for a long time now. So how do you feel? I mean, you were born in the Czech Republic, and so how do you feel the future of the small languages in Europe? Or literatures in Europe, smaller languages, literatures with small languages. Does it work or not? You take it.
Okay. Well, that's always a good question, and it's a question that's kind of at the center of our attention. Literature Across Frontiers really started specifically for this reason, because we wanted to highlight the literatures written in the, we can call them smaller languages, or we can call them languages spoken by few people. But nevertheless, these languages have equally important literatures. And so we have been working mainly with authors from these who write in the languages of limited diffusion, or less translated languages, whatever we want to call them. And of course, you would say, okay, what about someone like Francesca, who writes in English, and she writes from the perspective of someone who was born and brought up in Wales. Again, I would say that what happens here is that Welsh authors who write in English, and especially if they live in Wales, they really compete with authors who are also Anglophone, but are more part of the mainstream, whether they are English or American, or Irish. I suppose Ireland has a very special position because of having authors who are very well known historically, like James Joyce. So also writing in English may put you in that kind of camp of, literature that's located in a place that may not be so well known globally. So when we are here, people always ask, where are you from? Where are you from? What's your country? And the answer is Wales or Cymru, which would be even lesser known. And it gives us an opportunity to explain where it is. If they don't know, sometimes they know. We just met a young man who even knew the Welsh word for the language and the Welsh word for book, didn't he? So you asked, being Czech, yes, that puts me in the same boat. And at the same time, the Czech Republic, or what used to be Czechoslovakia, the Czech language, has some great authors. But somehow what I would say is that we need to make a greater effort to promote our literature, and that's something that's really important, and it's important to keep it in mind, because we need to make an effort, we need to support, we need to promote the work, and we need to support its translation. So that's what Wales is doing. It's doing it really well, and there are books that have been translated into a number of languages. Both in India, we have some books in Malayalam, we have books in Bangla, and then, of course, languages of Europe. So it's also a question of government investment and support. And at this point, I would like to say that we are really grateful to Wales Literature Exchange for supporting this anthology, and to Wales Wales Arts International, who made it possible for us to be here, and to the British Council for giving us space to be able to sign books. So again, to remind you that the two authors will be there, and they will be able to sign your copies if you come and buy them.
I am curious to know, this is from both of you as well as from Alexandra, it's not exactly literature, but since we are discussing cross-country and cross-language relations, I'm sure all of you were quite, you must have felt much more disappointed than me, because you were part of it in one way or the other, that Brexit happened, like Britain's exit from EU. Now, Wales, as Alexandra was saying, that Wales, through not only your Wales Literature Exchange, but Literature Across Frontiers being based in Wales and so on. So Wales, as a small language and literature as a country, has been really pioneering a pan-European exchange, let's say, And in the middle of that, you see that Britain coming out of EU. How does it feel, and how does that feel? How does that work when you are talking to other European writers? And I feel it's kind of an ironical situation that UK is out, whereas Wales is trying to create a larger European dialogue. And if any comments on that?
Well, I have to say, when Brexit happened, it was a complete disaster. What a nightmare. It was terrible. We want to talk to everyone. We want to be part of something bigger, and suddenly being part of the UK or part of Britain was stopping us from talking to other countries, and it felt really terrible. It was a trauma. It was a traumatic event. That's how I felt it anyway. People ask me sometimes if I want independence for Wales. Well, yes and no. I don't want Wales to be on its own. I want Wales to be part of a bigger thing. And actually being part of the UK is preventing us from being part of a bigger, wider world, and that's how it feels. It's very, very frustrating. Sunandan was asking about publishing in small languages. There's a lot of freedom in that, in a way. Nobody pays attention to you, and you can say, perhaps sometimes if you're writing in a large, powerful language, you are more constrained. There are often commercial pressures on you as well. But if you're writing in a small language for a small publisher, there can be great freedom in that. You can say what you like. And let us not forget the huge gift of translation. That is what is enabling all of us to talk to each other. It doesn't matter what language we speak. Through the medium of translation, through the work of translators, like Sunandan himself, And through people like Alexandra, who make these connections possible, who start these dialogues between authors and readers, authors and other authors in different cultures and countries, we can all be part of the big republic of letters. And that's what I want to be part of. You know, I want to share across borders and boundaries. And I'm so cross with Brexit for preventing these dialogues from happening, because that is actually has been the concrete effect of that unfortunate event.
I mean, I absolutely agree with second everything that Angharad said. I think the sad thing, though, is so when Brexit happened, I was actually living in France, where I spent a good 10 years-ish. And number one, it was a huge shock. And as you said, it was a trauma. I think it was probably one of the most shocking, biggest political shocks that I ever had in my life. But it was also materially suddenly a big problem for me, because I lived in Europe, where hitherto I'd always had the right to live and suddenly no longer had. But what I will say is that the sad thing is that as far as I'm aware, Wales voted to leave as well, right? I think Scotland was the only part of the United Kingdom where they voted to stay. I think it was a lot closer, or it was, you know, in Wales it wasn't quite as bad as it was in England, but I think the sad thing is, as much as there's so many people in Wales who are doing such wonderful work, you know, organisations like Literature Across Frontiers, and there are people who seem to be more receptive to, I think just from the very nature of being a bilingual culture, receptive to other cultures and other languages and this kind of transmission, this communication across borders. We also have to face that at the same time, this kind of horrifying, regressive, nativist trend that is sweeping right across the world has also affected Wales. So, you know, you've got so many people who are doing such wonderful work to promote this communication, to promote this international solidarity, but, you know, the malaise that is affecting England, that's affecting India, that's affecting America, that's affecting all these countries is present, you know, those currents are present in Wales as well. And it's, I think what you just said about being part of the Republic of Letters, that is such an inspiring thing, because maybe it's naive, maybe it's futile to think this, but I do genuinely believe that literature, it's something that we as people, as literary practitioners, we have a duty to utilize literature and utilize words as a tool to fight these kind of regressive currents that are sweeping across countries, you know, worldwide, globally.
Okay, just now a little bit different. We have possibly another 10 minutes, so we will do a little bit of a different. Tell me one thing that, in a different context, in a more traditional manner, if I ask that, on Welsh writing in general, I mean, say, for example, when I read your book, Life of Rebecca Jones, as I have mentioned this to many of my friends in Bengal, that I saw a kind of a writing style or a narrative style that's not unknown to Bengal, that in the sense that you have this rural setting and you also have this sense of, let's say, certain gaps. For example, in this case, that the three blind brothers, they did not have a blind school in Wales at that time. So it's kind of, as a reality, it is a kind of a reality that Bengalis or Indians in general are aware of, that you do not have a certain facility, and especially for people with, in this case, visual challenge. But overall, I mean, I have an author, for example, who is 75% blind, who writes even now. There are situations in Bengal in that sense where such things happen. But I was discussing with an Ukrainian poet 2 days ago, or discussing with a Ukrainian poet's book, where she talks about power cuts. And those of us, some of my friends here in the audience would know that in 1980s in Bengal, in Calcutta, there were frequent power cuts. So there are those realities which kind of bind us also. But a different question to you is that, which are the authors, for example, non-English, if I take larger European or even the Russian world, which authors would have influenced a new generation of Welsh writing, say between 1970s and the early 2000s?
yes, we all have experiences in common. I think the experiences my grandparents had on a farm in Wales in the 20th century will be replicated all over the world. People have the same conversations in small villages. You know, it's incredible. As regards the influence or the inspiration of other writers internationally, well, I'm going back to my previous point, the power of the word. I can't tell you how much inspiration I've had this week, for example, from listening to writers from India speaking about their work. Everything they say almost resonates, and it helps me understand my own culture better. Then we have people from Russia. I've personally been very inspired by Tolstoy. He's my favorite author, you know, and each word, each work, each sentence can resonate. Sometimes it's very easy to feel hopeless, especially when you're in a small culture. Our language is very endangered. You know, we exist in the shadow of this Goliath of the English language, and we're struggling there with less than 500,000 speakers. And it's very easy to despair. But sometimes one sentence written by someone in another part of the world, maybe Tolstoy 150 years ago, maybe Amitav Ghosh here in India today, maybe Tagore, you know, it can resonate with you, it can give you strength, it can give you inspiration, and you think, well, there are people like us out there. We can be inspired. So literature, going back to my book, The Life of Rebecca Jones, that book would not have been written except for the example of a German writer. I don't know if you know the name of Sebald. He was a contemporary. He was born after the Second World War. He wrote in German. He lived in England. And without the inspiration of this German writer, I would not have written this Welsh novel. So I can't begin. I'm a student of literature. I studied modern languages. So the example of other countries is just so rich, so vast. I don't even know how to respond to the question.
Funnily enough, one of the things that Angharad and I have in common is that we both studied modern languages at university, and speaking personally, French literature has had a huge influence on me, especially 20th century French literature. I actually started writing my first book after I developed a very intense obsession with the French novelist Patrick Modiano. I think he really kind of burst open the doors for me of how to write. And I was also thinking, when Angharad was speaking, I recently did a course there's a centre for literature in Wales called Tir Newydd. It's a really magical place. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to teach there. And I did a wonderful course for kind of writers at the very beginning of their practice and their career, who don't necessarily come from the kind of backgrounds where you would traditionally be able to afford or have the luxury to go on a writer's residency, but all Welsh writers. And we were studying short fiction, we were doing short fiction because short fiction is such a great avenue for writers to get started. And the three texts that I chose to look at, one was by an amazing Irish writer called Mary Costello. There was another by an American writer, Ben Lerner, and the third one was by Bengali-American writer Jhumpa Lahiri, who I know is obviously hugely famous all over the world, who was speaking in Kolkata just this week. And she's a writer who has had such an influence on how I write short stories, especially because I think she has this incredible knack for capturing these universal feelings of like experiences of being human in these really precise moments, which I think is what the best short stories do. That's the point of a wonderful short story. I think more generally Welsh writers, I know certainly of my generation, which is kind of people in their 30s or quite young writers, my sort of peers, my Welsh peers that I speak to, are influenced generally by the same kind of writers that all people in our generation are influenced by at the moment. So, for example, a good friend of mine, Gwen Ellis, who writes in the Welsh language in Cymraeg, she's just had her first novel out. She was a memoirist before that. And she loves Sally Rooney, who obviously is one of the most famous writers at the moment. So I think, there's this kind of, all those currents that are existing all over the world are prevalent in contemporary Wales as well. As we were talking about not working in isolation, I think we're all influenced by people from all over the world, and it's really important that we carry on with that,
There was someone I forgot to mention who's been incredibly influential on some of us in North Wales. It's the Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He came to visit us in Bangor at my university in North Wales a few years ago. We'd been studying his important book, Decolonizing the Mind, where he talks about the importance of writing in indigenous languages. And he, in his case, Kikuyu, he's written, he wrote the most important pioneering novel in that language when he was in jail in Kamiti Security Prison. He came to see us in Wales. He made the effort to come there. Hundreds of people came to listen to him, and he just inspired everybody. So the inspiration of this African writer, exiled African writer, in a small Western corner.
And have some similarities with, a small language territory like Wales. I mean, obviously, even in South Africa-oriented culture in many ways, even there, the small languages are just not existent almost as literary languages. I mean, in India, of course, there are also small languages that are getting marginalized or are marginal, but there is still some element because some of the languages are pretty big in India as well. So our relationship with English, there are Bengali authors who are writing in Bengal who may feel somewhat of occasionally a second-class citizen compared to Amitav Ghosh, but still will not feel as marginalized as someone who is writing in an African, possibly the person will not even get a chance to write in an African tongue. The imperial presence is so high. But I was just thinking, because Alexandra always, she comes from, because she was born and raised in the Czech Republic, that always keeps on coming back to my mind, because we have also had a communist party in power for a very long time in West Bengal. So I was just wondering one thing, that, a writer who all of you know, and many of my friends here know, Václav Havel, who is now going to have another political sort of rerun because of the Canadian Prime Minister's quoting him, and a speech that has gone viral. I don't know whether you have, so this is in the World Economic Forum in Davos, where the Canadian Prime Minister gave a very strong speech and basically referred to Václav Havel, when Václav Havel said that, you have to, kind of call a lie one day, that, there is a reference to some shopkeeper in a Czech town who was always putting up Workers of the World Unite, and one day he pulled it down, he pulled down that thing, and Mark Carney was basically saying that now it's time to call, the US lie, and so kind of the rights-based world order is, or rules-based world order is no longer the case, and so anyway, that's a whole political. So I'm just referring to Václav Havel in a different context, that in the former Eastern Bloc, you had a situation where the party and the state was suppressing writers. But now it's an interesting situation in the world that we do not actually have a party or a state suppressing, but in a way, one population, because the population is majoritarian. So the majoritarianism suppresses small languages and writing. It's a whole new experience where I think that, you cannot solve it through normal democratic means, this issue.
It's interesting, though, what you said about state suppression, because funnily enough, when we were at Kerala just a few days ago, we did actually meet a German writer, a writer of children's books, whose book has recently been banned in the US. And it was a huge scandal in Germany, and she was kind of a bit of a starry celeb at Kerala Literature Festival because everyone had heard about this her book being forbidden. So, I mean, I think as a writer in Welsh, you know, I'm writing in the kind of colonial dominant language as a writer in English, so I think it would probably be more interesting to hear what Angharad had to say about the suppression of Welsh as a language for literature. But I do think we have to stay conscious of the fact that states are banning books, and it's only going to get worse and worse the way things are going. Sorry, I'm being very pessimistic about the state of the world today. But yeah, so that was my main point, was that states are still not you know, we're not on the all clear yet. I don't know if you want to.
No, I think we're moving towards a totalitarian world, and it's a very worrying time. So this isn't going to be a problem that was faced in the past. I think it's going to be a problem that will also be faced in the future.
I think the one other thing I would say is you were talking about ways to overcome this with non-democratic means. And again, without wanting to sound like I'm hammering home the point, I do think small publishers, that, you know, that is a really, really useful tool in the kind of championing of smaller languages in the face of cultural dominance. So people doing your kind of work and people doing your kind of work, you know, you are the champions. You're the guys that these smaller language cultures need, really. So, and thank you, both of you. You know.
So we're at the end of the session. So we'll have a small gift for all the three guests here. So my translator friend Deb Chaudhary, my colleague Ahona, and Kaushik, my friend, if you can come up and please give this small gift bags to the three guests. So, Kaushik is my good friend, and Alexandra. One of his cousins stays in Wales. Yeah. Yeah. And there will be two more. We have a translator friend. He's a translator, one of our best translators, Deb Chaudhary and Francesca. And Ahona you met already. Ahona is my colleague, yeah. Thank you very much. And now we will open the book. That's right. But, and now এখন বইটার আনুষ্ঠানিক উদ্বোধন হবে এবং আরো যে বইগুলি আছে সেগুলি আমরা জানাবো আপনাদের।
So it's a great honor to be launching this book here. It's a small book of by very powerful women writers. So please have a look at it. Come to the British Council stand and buy, and Sampark, of course, to buy them, and then to the British Council to have them signed.
যে বইটা উদ্বোধন হচ্ছে এখন সেটা সামপার্কের স্টলে E46 ব্রিটিশ কাউন্সিলের ঠিক উল্টো দিকে আমাদের স্টল E46 সামপার্কের স্টলেও পাবেন। আর যদি লেখিকাদের দিয়ে সই করাতে চান তাহলে ব্রিটিশ কাউন্সিলের ওনারা থাকবেন 1 ঘন্টা, আপনারা সই করাতে পারেন। Six women's short stories from Wales, 6 জন লেখিকার লেখা, ওয়েলশ ভাষায় লেখা, সেখান থেকে ইংরেজিতে অনুবাদ করে আমরা প্রকাশ করলাম সামপার্ক থেকে। সেই 6 জনের মধ্যে 2 জন আঙ্গারাত প্রাইস এবং ফ্রান্সেসকা রিস এখানে আছেন, এবং ওয়েলসের আরেকজন লিটারেরি অর্গানাইজার আলেকজান্ড্রা বুকলার আছেন। সো আপনারা যারা বইটা কিনতে চাইবেন তারা আমাদের স্টল সামপার্কের স্টল E46-এ আসতে পারেন, এবং ওনারা ঠিক উল্টো দিকে ব্রিটিশ কাউন্সিলের স্টলে থাকবেন, সেখানে আপনারা সাইন করিয়ে নিতে পারেন বইটি দিয়ে। So those of you who want to come and buy this, you can do it at the Sampark stall, which is E46, and opposite is the British Council stall, where they will wait for an hour or so from now. এখন থেকে 6:30 7টা অবধি থাকবেন ওনারা। তো আপনারা যদি কেউ সাইন করাতে চান বইটা কিনে, তাহলে সাইন করাতে পারেন। আরও দুটো বই আপনাদের দেখাতে চাই। আঙ্গারাত উনি আমার ডান দিকে আছেন, ওনার এই বইটি বাংলাতেও পাবেন। এটার নাম রেবেকা জোনসের কথা। এটা আমরা কিছুদিন আগে অনুবাদ করে প্রকাশ করেছিলাম। সেই বইটিরও কপি সংগ্রহ করে আপনি নিতে পারেন আপনারা আমাদের স্টল থেকে। আর আরও একটা বই বাংলাতেও একটা ছোট গল্পের সংকলন আছে আমাদের ওয়েলসের, সেটাও আপনারা আমাদের স্টলে পেতে পারেন। I think we can end now. সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে thank you to our guests here, Angarad, Francesca and Alexandra. We end our session. And thank you to the Publishers Booksellers Guild.